book lovers, it is G-Swizz here, and I'm here today to talk about some of my favorite books that I've read in the first half of the year. This was meant to be a 7 on Sunday topic. However, due to me needing to recover, getting better from sickness, I needed to take a break. So this video will not be going up according to the 7 on Sunday schedule. However, it's here and I'm very much happy that I am able to talk about these books with you guys because, oh my goodness, I have so much raving to do. Pretty much this video doesn't really need much of an introduction because it's quite self-explanatory. So I guess without further ado, I'm gonna go into probably my top favorite books of this year so far. Who knows? They might just end up in my final countdown at the end of the year. We'll see. I'm gonna start off with the only book that I don't own physically yet. I don't own it yet because it got lost in transit and it took me a while to figure that out, and now the book depository is sending me a replacement, so hopefully it will get here soon. And that, my friends, is the latest book in the Crave series, Court. This was the first non-contemporary book to make this list this year. It took me a while to find a favorite this year. I mean, this list was kind of hard enough to compile as it was because I usually love fantasy or paranormal reads. However, for some reason this year, I just haven't found too many standouts. I have found standouts, and Court is one of those standouts. I loved this sequel so much because I feel like the sequel is what we needed earlier in the series. I understand why a lot of people quit the series because, yes, I love Crave. Everyone in the fandom loves Crave. Crush is a pretty polarizing book. I mean, I very much enjoy the direction of the story from Crush. However, Covet is a very hard book to get through. It's definitely more of a character journey more than anything. It's actually a very painful book, quite literally, because some of the characters in Covet are going through their own version of hell, and it's just wild. But Court, this book is the payoff for going through all of the first 3 books. We've finally made our way to Court. There are so many revelations, so many things that I reckon could have been revealed earlier. However, it definitely feels like a payoff because it's absolutely incredible. This book got delayed by 6 or 7 months. Trust me when I say it was completely worth the wait. 100%. I was just so incredibly blown away by the direction of the story and where Tracy took it. I do have problems with the Crave series, but overall, I think reaching Court made the painful experience of getting there more worth it. It is one of my favorite books of the year so far, and I am actually very surprised that it ended up being probably my first favorite fantasy paranormal book of the year. My next favorite book series of the year is one that was absolutely wholesome, and I wasn't necessarily expecting it to be as wholesome as it was, but I'm so glad that I read it. This is probably one of the best friends to lovers romances I've ever read, and it just so happens to be in the fantasy genre. That, my friends, is the Wraith King series by Grace Draven, or Grace Draven. I don't actually know how to pronounce it, so sometimes I will go back and forth. But if anyone can confirm, please let me know, and then I will start pronouncing it that way accordingly. I was not expecting to get what I got out of this book, but I received it, and I ain't mad about it. I really love this series. The first book's pretty good, but the sequel and finale, Eidolon, it definitely takes the cake for me. I absolutely adored that. It was definitely a very satisfactory conclusion with potential for more spin-offs in this world, which there technically is according to Kindle Unlimited, so that's pretty cool. Now, I recently talked about this book series in my June wrap-up, so I won't necessarily go into too much detail here, but what I do have to say is this series was an absolute pleasant surprise to me. I kind of knew that it was going to be one of my favorites. However, I didn't realize that a friends to lovers romance would pull on my heartstrings the way that it did in this book series. Like, usually friends to lovers is something that I look forward to in maybe something to do with like contemporary romance, and you know, in my marriage situation we were also friends to lovers. So in all honesty, I do find friends to lovers wholesome. However, I wasn't expecting to root for a friendship to lover dynamic as hard as I did when I read this book series, because I think the fact that both these characters are from 2 different races and then just develop a friendship and then all of a sudden just be each other's partners and start to prioritize each other in the marriage way, it just for some reason makes my heart sing. It just was absolutely beautiful. I loved the progression of this relationship. That is one of the many reasons why I absolutely loved the series. I also loved the plot and I loved the political elements as well. I just reckon that all of it was tied well together, and this series was perfectly paced. I usually think that duologies are usually too short, or maybe they're too long and they should have been a standalone. This was a perfect length. It's just absolutely cute, and if I just want to be happy, I'm just gonna revisit the series because this series, it just made me squeal in happiness. Now I'm gonna move on to some contemporary romance, and I think one of my favorite contemporary romances of this year was 100% The Charm Offensive. This book made me smile, it made me laugh, and it made me cry cry. It brought so many emotions out of me, and I just think that the representation in here to do with mental health is just so realistic. Also, it's very rare that I find asexual representation to like completely resonate with me, but the way that it was done in the Charm Offensive, personally to me, was one of the most memorable and relatable forms of representation that I've experienced. This book was absolutely heartwarming, but also it was soul-crushing. I don't want to spoil anything, but what I do have to say is you need to read it for yourself to find out. But what I also love about this book is that it is completely entertaining. Pretty much this novel takes place in a reality TV show setting, and oh my goodness, the way that it was done sometimes, it was incredibly hilarious, but also it just gripped me so much. I adored the setting, I adored representation in here. I just felt like this story absolutely knocked me out of the park. I highly recommend The Charm Offensive if you haven't picked it up yet. I think it is one of the most underrated books. I understand that there are a lot of TikTok romances out there that are very popular, but I believe that The Charm Offensive in particular deserves a lot more hype. And ironically, I'm gonna bring up a contemporary romance that has a similar color palette on its front cover, but I also enjoyed it just as much as I enjoyed The Charm Offensive, and that, my friends, is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. I don't necessarily talk about this book a lot here on my channel, but I appreciate this book. I understand why this book is frustrating to a lot of people, especially if you do love romance, but what I liked about this book in particular is that it was an interracial romance, and the interracial aspect of the story was a big one, and it meant a lot to me as someone who is in an interracial marriage to kind of like experience someone else's culture, and it kind of addresses what it's like to be in an interracial relationship. And I think this book is very memorable to me personally because it actually inspired me to come up with my WIP idea. The current hurdle that I'm experiencing now is that the further I move away from this book, the less I feel inspired to keep writing that WIP. That is an interracial romance itself, kind of inspired by Camilo's and my story. And Roomies by Christina Lauren, that's kind of also an honorable mention. That also gave me a bit of inspiration as well. But The Spanish Love Deception kind of birthed that idea within me, and that's why I see it as one of my favorites. I totally get it. I totally understand why not many people love it. It's a very thick book with not as much spice as a lot of people want there to be. However, I think that this just really encouraged me to write my own story. If anything, it just felt empowering to read this book, and I cannot wait to read more from Elena Armas in the future. And the next book that made it to my favorites list for this year was actually the first romance book I read this year, and also the book that inspired my recent rampage of contemporary romances. And that, my friends, is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This is definitely one of my favorite Tessa Bailey books. I've got another one on this list, but I absolutely loved this one. I have noticed, as opposed to some of her other books, this book is thicker. I found it to be a lot more developed. I found that there was a lot of plot in this, as well as a good balance of steam and a good balance of commitment. I could see this being developed into a rom-com movie or a rom-com series. The Bellinger sisters, I can see it happening. I know that a lot of people like Hook, Line, and Sinker better. I personally like It Happened One Summer better. This one I gravitate toward so much more. Personally, I think that's because of the length of the novel. I think it's the time that we got to spend with them, as opposed to Hannah and Fox in the sequel slash companion. I did love the sequel slash companion, but at the end of the day, I think that It Happened One Summer had everything I wanted in a romance novel, and even more. And the last of the contemporary novels before I move on to some fantasy books that I got into and absolutely loved, has got to be probably my favorite Tessa Bailey novel at the moment. That, my friends, is Love Her or Lose Her. This book, I was not expecting to hit hard or be as relatable as it was, but it was completely relatable. And what I appreciate about this book is that it is a second chance romance between two lovers who have actually been married for 10 years and trying to work things out. What I also love about this novel so much is that they are going through counseling, and at the end of the day, they choose to apply what they learn and to work it out. I understand that this novel is not at all perfect. I think that one of these characters did kind of make a mistake toward the end. However, I'm appreciative that they acknowledged that that was a mistake. I think this novel has a special place in my heart because now I'm on the marriage end of things. And personally, I felt like I could relate to this story more than majority of the romances that I do read. Even though I do love reading romances, I do love the idea of romance. I think I appreciate this romance story so much because I find it to be applicable in my stage of life. This is definitely, so far, I'd have to say, my favorite romance contemporary of the year. Now, a fantasy novel that made it onto my favorites list was The Gilded Cage by Lynette Noni. As I'm currently filming this video, I am currently reading The Blood Trader, and I have a feeling that that is also going to be a favorite. It is a painful book to read. After reading The Gilded Cage, after The Gilded Cage ended, oh my goodness, The Gilded Cage, I feel like did not have a proper epilogue. But then again, I thought to myself that The Blood Trader would be dual POV. No, everything is from Kiva's point of view, and in my opinion, it makes the experience a little bit more painful. You'd understand if you have read it. Personally, I think this is an excellent continuation from The Prison Healer. I did enjoy The Prison Healer, but I wasn't expecting to enjoy the continuation a lot more. And I think that comes down to exploring more of the world than just the prison setting. Essentially, I found the story entertaining. I found the plot to be entertaining. I found the characters to be great. I found some characters to be very unlikable and very annoying, but characters that you're not meant to like. And you know what? I have to admit, I did predict where this book was going to go. I didn't predict like the very last chapter and like, you know, that happening. However, I predicted the plot twist. It kind of felt a little bit obvious. However, I do like how the story foreshadowed that. And I think that Lynette Noni did an excellent job at writing the sequel. And at the moment, I'm reading the finale, and I think that the finale might just gear up to be even stronger than the first two books. The second last book series that I absolutely loved this year that I would like to share as a favorite was the Fair Isle Trilogy by Tessandra Odette. Now, I have comped this trilogy to the Cruel Prince / Folk of Air series. I stand by that. I absolutely love the romance. I do find that there were some problems in this book series. I mean, there was one problematic element I found in the last book that I wasn't necessarily okay with. However, the overall story I did quite enjoy. I reckon that this book series is completely underrated. Like, I know Tessandra Odette has some hardcore fans, and now I've become a hardcore fan. Tessandra Odette has become one of my new favorite authors. I know that I read a previous trilogy from her. I did love the Layla trilogy. However, I really feel like the Fair Isle trilogy solidified her as a favorite author. I just feel like not many people are praising her books. I think that she is a very skilled writer, but also the way that Tessandra Odette writes her characters, I think that she makes the experience following them immersive, but she also makes the payoff worth it in the end. I think that Tessandra Odette is a very skilled writer because she's not afraid to write very unlikable characters, or characters that eventually become unlikable in order to kind of prove the point of the story. Definitely one of my favorite series of the year. I could not recommend enough. And finally, my favorite book / book series of this first half of the year so far has got to be the Bargainer trilogy, or really, like, if we're talking about books in general, Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassa. I did enjoy the rest of the books in the series. I don't want you guys to think that I didn't enjoy the rest of the books because I love the first book the most. I love the first book because of the way that it is told, and I reckon that if people don't want to continue on reading the series, they can actually just read the first book and be done with it. The rest of the series follows the adventures of Desmond and Calypso going forward. However, the first book is how they come together as a couple. And if anything, I find this love story to be absolutely beautiful. But if we're talking about the rest of the Bargainer trilogy, the rest of the series is absolutely phenomenal. I am so impressed with it, but I do have to say that this series could either be read as just one book, or you can read all three books, and all three books are amazing. If I was to say that if there was one favorite book that I had from this year in general, it'd be Rhapsodic. The way that it was written was just beautiful. I cried a lot while reading this book. I knew that the Bargainer trilogy was going to be maybe a new favorite of mine, but I wasn't expecting it to be like the new favorite of mine. I love the Bargainer trilogy. So I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to stay till the end of the video, leave me the purple heart emoji. I don't know, I was inspired by the Fair Isle trilogy and my copy of Rhapsodic, so leave that down in the comments if you happen to stay. If you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers. And also, I have social medias. I'm at GSwizzleBooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/GSwizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at GSwizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it in a double. Started out with half and I flipped it in a double.